chair, I'd be wrong, yeah? If I point to you and say chair, this is
What are we talking about?
All right, someone start recording.
what is a chair? I'm not kidding you. I'm not messing with you. I'm not doing a
I'm already
bit.
on it.
What is a chair?
That's
I
a
want
good
to
question.
understand what a yes, it is.
I guess it's.
I agree.
A chair is
What
simply
is
an
a chair?
object you
How do
sit
I
on.
define a chair? Okay,
know what it
the
is.
floor is a chair. You are a chair. The roof is a chair if I get my butt up there.
A cactus is
The
a
chair is
Then
a.
what-
A chair has to have a leg, I would say. So.
It has to have at
One
least
leg,
one
at
leg,
least.
yeah?
It's something on legs that
Okay,
you sit
horses
on.
are chairs. Horses
Technically,
are chairs.
yes.
Sit on it without like.
You consider a horse a
Inanimate
chair.
object, I
If
guess.
I pointed at a horse and talked to my mom and said, "Hey, mommy, look, chair," she would say, "Yeah, that's a chair." She'd say, "No, you dipshit, that's a horse."
What's the definition of a chair,
Before
then?
we can talk about the chair,
We
need to talk about the floor.
Inanimate too.
Before we can talk about the chair, we need to talk about the floor because we need some kind of fixed reference so that when we agree what the floor is, then for example the floor can be moving.
A
and
chair
there's
is
inside
an
a train
inanimate
or-
object that you sit on.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
An inanimate object that you sit on. Tables or chairs.
Without.
Technically,
I
yes,
guess
that
you
is
could
true.
say without me.
You consider tables to be chairs. If I point at a table with no chairs around and I say, "Mommy, look, chair," would she say, "Yes, you're right, little Timmy," or would she say, "No, no, no, you dipshit, that's a table"? Would she say, "Yeah, that's a chair"?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we need to go deeper into this
She
rabbit
wouldn't
hole.
say that's a chair, right? She would put that into the box of not
Be a
chair,
if you
right?
really wanted
She would put you in the memory box.
Yeah.
a door
She
to
would
be a
put you
chair
in the
with
memory
a seat on
box.
top of it.
Yeah, but that's not what we think of when we colloquially say chair. We're thinking of something else, right? We don't think of
I think
tables
It's a
as
surface that you can plant your ass on. That is literally what I call
You
a chair.
are a-
Anything
you are a
can plant
chair.
your ass on.
you are a
Yes.
chair. If I plant my butt,
Yes.
this isn't what we think of. If little Timmy pointed at you and said, "Hey,
I'm
mommy,
just
look,
waiting.
chair," would that mommy say, "No, no, no, that's a person," or would they be like, "Yes, yes, that's a chair"? What would that
So-
mommy say?
No, I
What
ain't
is a chair?
person. I'm a gremlin. I'm a creature.
What is a chair? I agree. That's a great question, and I'll get to that once people feel confident that there isn't a full answer,
Well, there isn't
because
a full
there
answer.
isn't a full answer.
I'm just discovering that
Any-
now.
Yes, any definition that you can
Couldn't you
provide
say
for a
the same thing
chair,
For tables though.
yes, you can. Absolutely, we'll get there. You're walking a few steps ahead. We'll get to that. There is no definition for a chair. Any definition you can come up with is going to either include something that isn't a chair or disclude something that is a chair. That no matter what you do, it's always going to have this mess because this is not how we figured out what chairs are. When you were a little kid, your mommy didn't sit you down and explain with rigid mathematical terms what a chair is. She just pointed
boy.
and said, "Go sit in that chair over there." And you looked and you observed this object she was referencing, and your mind said chair. And you sat on that thing. And then later, when you saw a horse and said, "Hey, mommy, look, chair," she said, "No, you little shit, that's not a chair, that's a horse." So you put the horse that you just saw into not chair as a box. And you kept sorting. You kept receiving information, and you kept sorting these things into not chair and chair, never
horse went to
reaching
the
an
memory
objective
box.
definition for what a chair is. And the best part is, you came up with guesses in your head. When you see new objects, you guess at chair and not chair. And you validate. What's up, Deadlock?
I have the wiki of a chair pulled up. I can read it out if you want me to.
And
Oh,
it will be
boy.
wrong. I promise you there will be exceptions that that definition gives you. I promise
A
you.
chair is a type of seat typically designed for one person and consisting of one or more legs, a flat or slightly angled seat, and a backrest.
Okay.
They may be
Okay.
made of wood,
Okay.
metal, or
It
synthetic
says okay.
materials.
Okay. Wood, metal, and synthetic materials is all things we construct things out of, so that doesn't add to our specificity. Typically doesn't give us specificity because when is the typically true and when is the typically false? So what in that definition was determinative? Because if I say a number may be a thing I write down, well, that tells me nothing about what a number is. If I see some object that is written down, I don't know that it is a number. I know that it might be a number, but I want the certainty. I want to know, is this thing a number or not? Yes,
Uh,
but it will
A
fall to
number
the
can be
same
considered a unit
problem.
of measurement.
something you can add, I guess. Like,
Something
A
you
number
can
can be
add.
considered a
Get a
unit of
bigger
measurement.
You can add
Some
it
Except
numbers
together,
you
that
cannot
Okay.
add.
right?
It can be considered, but not always. So when do I know if I see a unit of measurement whether it is or is not a number? And if I see something that isn't a unit of measurement, how do I know whether that is or is not a number? You haven't
don't.
provided me with something that lets me go from someone who can't know what a number is yet to someone who does know what a number is. I want to make that journey.
You need a way
I want to
from
go
point
from
A
someone
to
who
point
doesn't
B.
know what this thing is. Yes, I want to go from someone who doesn't know what a chair is to being able to point and say chair like the rest of us can. I want to make that journey. But this journey is not one you can do from rigid definition.
How
Damn, you're making me
complex
think
can the
think life.
definition of a chair be?
No matter what
Let's
you
see.
do,
Oh,
it will
no.
not be detailed enough because people are not getting to this definition through rigid formulation. They get to it from social learning. As I was saying, the little kid, they learn an example of chair, and then they take guesses. They guess that a horse is a chair, and then say, hey, mommy, look, chair. And then the mom says, no, that's not a chair, that's a horse. So they box it into the not chair box. And then they keep guessing and having those guesses either validated as yes, a chair, or refuted as no, a not chair, or
How
the
long till
reverse
the
if they
kid
think
goes
it's
into
not
the
a
memory
chair.
box?
You, you know what's
Eventually.
interesting?
What's
You are
up?
describing the training process of a neural network.
Yes, I am exactly describing
What?
the training process for a neural network. We are neural networks. That is true. You are correct. But this process, a neural network learns by itself through its stimuli in its environment. But we are better than that. We have friends. We have people we talk to validate. Our utility function isn't something we're just given. It is something that is around us. It's
Wrong
people
person.
telling us whether we're correct or not. Our utility function is a social network instead of a objective output function. I was just talking in terms of generalized intelligences, yes, which seems to be something they're more comfortable with, knowledge-wise. Which I assume you're already versed on the subject I'm talking about, right?
Somewhat.
Not at all.
Okay, so neural networks, any neural network, any generalized intelligence is going to have a utility function. It's how they evaluate if they're doing a good job or not. And the distinction between neural nets, computer neural nets at least, is that they have a utility function that's built in with it, that just outputs an objective value. But our utility function is for learning what words are, not an objective, you did a good job or you did a bad job. It is other people. It is other people telling us you did a good job or a bad job. And here's the trick. If other people started saying something was in the chair box when previously it wasn't, then the kids would learn that those things go in the chair box. So those things to those kids would be chairs. And because we learn what chairs are.
So it could be considered
Yes,
like
it's a makeshift hive mind. Yes. These definitions are not gifts from God that we were handed down as peons. We, as a society, construct these definitions cooperatively. We work together as a social group to construct these definitions. They are something called a social construct. This is important because these definitions are not objective. They are something we collaborate to form. They are a cultural norm, as I say in my video, and I choose that word very carefully. And the magical part is that these social constructs can shift their properties to fit with how we use them. If we started considering stools to be chairs, if everybody changed the language to say stools are a type of chair instead of not a type of chair, that's the thing. If that was our answer, then stools would be chairs. There's no objective chair police that is going to tell you, no, you're wrong.
Object.
Go ahead.
Object.
Let's hear it.
Explain.
Explain your reasoning, please. Oh, was that not you? I thought that was you.
No, that
I
was
think that was the wall guy, and then he
Oh,
left.
who objected? Oh, whatever. Whatever, he doesn't. If he's not going to elaborate his position, then he doesn't matter. But the important part.
Yeah, I was trying to say like.
Yeah, he doesn't matter. You have to. If generally people don't. Think about it. Let's flip it. If stools are a type of chairs, if people stopped saying that stools are a type of chair, if they were considered not chairs, there is no higher power which is telling us what chairs are. We determine what chairs are. So by changing that language and how people think about it, if we change that language, what we consider to be chairs, then chairs would be different.
Holy shit, this is longer than the last one.
They do not yeah, they are not objective things handed down by God. These just are. From language, from communication with each other. This is not strictly religious. This is about social constructs, Chief. The important...
Speaking of religion...
This is not necessarily religious. This is about social constructionism. But the important part... You're wrong, but okay.
It sounded like religion,
there is...
right?
Okay, Chief.
I mean,
Listen from the start next time, please. Probably. Let me mute him. Where is... I don't see his username. What is his username? This is distraction.
Steven
the important part. Okay, if you're not going to, like,
Cartman,
just
why
say
did
random
you-
stuff. Thanks, Cartman.
bro, what is?
But important thing is that these social constructs are fluid. If we change the language, how we talk about these things to each other, and how we learn these subjects, the things themselves will change. These are not objective facts of life, but things we talk about. There may be an objective world for which we're referencing for this, but what matters is whether or not it fits within the box or not, and that part is subjective. So, there are many social constructs out there that are dealing with this exact problem of whether or not the definition can shift. Different social constructs have different properties to them. For instance, being 5'2" is much more material than being tall. Being tall is dependent on your environment, who's around you, who's being referenced. But being 5'2" is based off of our measuring system and how we evaluate height, and a bunch of other smaller factors that don't matter right now. But the important part is, one of these two things is dependent on your environment and fluid with your situation, and the other of these doesn't really change without your actual, like, height changing. These things can adapt. So, there are some social constructs that have a lot of influence, have a lot of power, because words have a sort of power. Not a literal, like, magic spell power, but words have an effect on how people are treated. If someone is considered tall, we're going to treat them differently than we treat them if they are not tall, because of cultural stuff that doesn't matter here. So whether or not, like, how we end up defining the properties of tall is going to influence a lot of things. And there's one social construct that I consider exceptionally important for this subject, and that is the social construct of gender. Specifically, the important property for a lot of trans people is whether or not that is able to change throughout someone's life, whether or not they can change from being in one box to a different box. When asking which definition we can use, objective definitions cannot be achieved. That goal needs to be disregarded. We can't reach an objective definition. We learn these things through examples. We learn examples of men and women throughout our lives and use that to understand whether someone is or is not a man or a woman. So, when asking whether or not we should change a definition, like the properties of it, to match some other aspect, we've got to ask, how do we evaluate definitions? And I consider a good way of evaluating definitions to be something called utility. And we're not going to get into ethics right now, but basically utility is one that generates the most good, what makes people the most happy. And I would say letting people live their lives is going to let people be a lot happier than forcing them to fit within a box just because we think that's how it's supposed to be. I'd say that generates a lot more utility. And since there is no objective definition for these things are socially constructed, we have to run with what's going to make people happiest. And I would say letting people present how they want to present and choose that box is a more useful way of defining gender than one in which it is fixed and bound from birth. And it's more useful.
Can I say
It
something?
makes people happier. Yeah, go ahead.
So, I think that hold on.
I believe in you,
can't
Chief.
remember what I was gonna say.
I know you can do it.
I can't remember what I was gonna say.
That's okay. If it comes back, just talk about it.
Okay,
All right. I
actually
think it's
have a
question time. Go right ahead.
What is the subject of
Thank you.
today? Or
The
is this,
subject of today
discussion?
varies. This one is social constructionism and the importance it
Okay.
has for trans people.
And chairs.
I also
Okay, I got it.
Chairs
This
are
started with
social
a chair.
construct. So yes, social constructionism. Yes, this started with a very simple question that gets at the
remember what I was gonna say.
foundations of what is things. Yes.
I'm enjoying this.
Thank you.
So, I think this is gonna sound kind of bad, but
That's okay.
transgender people do whatever you want. But like, I don't
Based.
think we should be going around changing our genders. We should just stick with what we were born with. That's what God decided for us. He picked us to be a man or a woman. But if you're atheist, then I can see you arguing against that. But me, I'm a Christian. So I'm saying I don't think we
What's
should
your
be
proof?
going around changing all our genders. What?
Oh no.
What's your proof that God exists? If we're going to be bringing this into theology, we gotta question that.
Didn't we find all the crosses that he was crucified on, and like a bunch of like stuff that hasn't
Okay.
a bunch of stuff happened that he said in the Bible? said
Jesus
was
lived,
gonna happen?
Jesus was a person who was alive, and he was crucified. However, this isn't proof that God exists, merely that there was a guy over in Bethlehem who existed.
Okay, yeah.
So I ask again, what is your proof of the Christian God?
Well, in the Bible, it says a bunch of stuff are gonna happen. I can't think of anything. off
It's
the
a
top of my
pretty
head.
funny
And
book
then it
with a lot of
happens.
cool stories.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a pretty funny book. Typically when we cite sources for these things, yes, and that's okay, a lot of people don't. So, when we don't have proof of things, we have to go with something called the null hypothesis. Allow me to use an important analogy. Say right there, just outside the reach of our telescopes, is a teapot. Just right there, right? It's just outside the reach of our telescope, so we haven't seen it yet. Prove to me that this teapot does not exist. That's kind of bullshit for me to ask you to do, right? It's kind of fucked. I'm asserting the existence of teapot, and I'm now asking you to disprove it? That's ridiculous. I'm asking you to do something that I haven't done myself. There is a burden of proof that I need to provide before asking you to disprove it. I am asserting something and then asking you to disprove it. That's messed up. That is not right. And when it comes to this, you can apply something called the Sagan standard. And this is the idea that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That if I make a claim, my evidence for its existence should be proportionate with how wild this claim is. More generally, this is called parsimony.
Yeah.
And by making this claim of this teapot's existence, I am asserting something. I am asserting teapot exists. So I need to provide evidence that matches with the ridiculousness of this claim. I agree, I am going crazy. Similarly, a lot of religion is asserting a very strange teapot. And there's proofs for God. We'll probably get into Thomas Aquinas at some.
That's literally what I'm here for, because he's pretty smart.
Hello?
Wait.
Oh no!
No!
Oh no, he broke!
Handle the business. You know what I'm saying?
This will not stand. This must continue.
In the middle of a speech, too.